Ruth Ann Dawson, a 47-year-old church secretary, is now in federal custody tonight, accused of eliminating 8 men. We're coming to you live from Elm Street, where police have just confirmed the discovery of a body.
Between March of 1984 and October of 1984, 8 men lost their lives in Barton County, Kentucky. 8 men, 8 months, 8 different methods. The person responsible was a 47-year-old widow, a church secretary, a woman who had never received so much as a parking ticket in her entire life. Her name was Ruth Ann Dawson. The FBI called it the most methodical case of retaliation in American history. Local residents called it something else: justice. Because those 8 men had done something first. Something the law refused to punish. Something that cost Ruth Ann everything she had ever loved. Her husband, her only son, taken from her over a gambling debt. $8,000. 2 lives lost in a single evening. And not one arrest, not one trial, not one consequence. The sheriff closed the case in February of 1983. Insufficient evidence, no witnesses. Ruth Ann received a form letter. She read it once, folded it neatly, placed it in her kitchen drawer. Then she began to plan. This is the story of a mother's patience, a wife's grief, and the 8 graves that proved desperation has no gender. The FBI would later find a notebook in that same kitchen drawer. 8 names, 8 dates, 8 methods, written in her neat church secretary handwriting. The last entry was dated 2 days before her arrest. If you have the courage to hear this story, leave your like and subscribe to this channel. But I warn you, some of you will condemn this woman by the end. Others will understand her. And a few of you, the honest ones, will admit you might have done the same thing. Barton County, Kentucky sits in the eastern coalfields, the part of America that built the nation and got nothing in return. By 1983, the mines had been closing for 15 years. The young people left for Lexington or Cincinnati or anywhere with jobs. The ones who stayed did what they could: odd work, disability checks, and for some, poker games with money they did not have. Thomas Dawson was a good man who made one bad decision. He had worked the mines for 22 years before his back gave out. Married Ruth Ann in 1959. Raised their son Michael in a 3-bedroom house on Cutter Road. Went to church every Sunday. Never missed a day of work until the doctor told him he had no choice. By 1982, the disability checks barely covered the mortgage. Thomas started playing cards at Dale Perkins's bar. Small stakes at first. $20 here, $50 there, then the losses mounted, $8,000. That was the final number. Money Thomas did not have, money he could not borrow, money that Dale Perkins intended to collect one way or another. January 15th, 1983. Ruth Ann was at her sister's house that evening, a Sunday. She would remember that detail for the rest of her life. Thomas and Michael were home, father and son, 49 and 22 years old. 8 men came to the house on Cutter Road. They did not knock. The coroner ruled it a robbery gone wrong. 2 individuals, multiple blunt force injuries, no witnesses. Everyone in Barton County knew who was responsible. The 8 men did not even hide. They drank at Dale Perkins's bar that same weekend, laughed about it, bought rounds for the house, $8,000, 2 lives. Ruth Ann buried her husband and her only child on the same grey Thursday in January. She stood at the graveside in silence. No tears. The pastor thought she was in shock. He was wrong. She was making a list. 8 men. Ruth Ann knew every one of them. Dale Perkins, 51 years old, owned the bar where the poker games happened. 3 prior assault charges on his record. No convictions. He made the call to collect the debt. The leader, Wayne Messer, Dale's cousin, did the collection work when men could not pay. Carried a baseball bat in his truck like other men carried toolboxes. Vernon Hayes, the one who swung first that night, the one who made her son watch his father fall, then turned on Michael. Ruth Ann would save him for last. Lonnie Brock, the mechanic, hands strong enough to crush a man's skull. He had used them. Roy Tackett, 28 years old, the youngest, wanted to prove himself to the older men. Proved it on Cutter Road. Earl Sloan, the driver, sat in the truck while the others went inside. Did not swing. Did not stop it either. Curtis Hall, bank teller. told Dale that Thomas had no money in his account, provided the address. Some forms of betrayal do not require fists. Jimmy Ratliff, the sheriff's nephew. His presence that night guaranteed one thing: no investigation would ever follow. 3 days after the funeral, Ruth Ann walked into the Barton County Sheriff's office. She sat across from Sheriff Harold Ratliff, looked him in the eye, named all 8 men, described what everyone in the county already knew. The sheriff listened, took notes, nodded sympathetically. His nephew Jimmy was named number 7 on her list. "We will look into it, Mrs. Dawson, I promise you that." They never did. The case was closed in February. Insufficient evidence, no witnesses willing to come forward. Ruth Ann received a form letter on county letterhead. "We regret to inform you that the investigation has concluded without sufficient grounds for prosecution." She read it once. 8 men had taken her husband and her son. The law had weighed their lives and found them worth less than the paperwork required to pursue justice. Ruth Ann folded the letter neatly, placed it in her kitchen drawer, the same drawer where she kept her notebook. She opened to the first page. 8 names written in her careful handwriting. If the system would not act, she would become the system. March was 2 weeks away. Earl Sloan worked the night shift at the Chevron station on Route 23, alone from 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning, same schedule for 11 years. Ruth Ann watched him for 2 weeks, learned his patterns, learned that no customers came between 1 and 4 most nights, learned that Earl liked to sit behind the counter reading hunting magazines with the radio turned low. Earl had not touched Thomas or Michael that night. He stayed in the truck, the driver, but he had driven them there, waited while it happened, drove them home after. Just the driver. There is no such thing as just. March 19th, 1984. 2:14 in the morning. Ruth Ann pulled into the Chevron station, the only car Earl had seen in 3 hours. He straightened behind the counter when she walked in. "Mrs. Dawson, everything all right?" "Car trouble. Down the road about half a mile. I cannot get it started." Earl grabbed his jacket. Helpful as always. Small town kindness. "Let me take a look. Probably just the battery." He followed her to the parking lot. Dark. Empty. The only light came from the buzzing sign above the pumps. The tire iron was inside her coat. She had practiced the swing for 2 months, against a fence post behind her house, again and again until her shoulders ached, until the motion felt natural. Earl never saw it coming. The first swing caught him behind the ear. He dropped to his knees. The second put him down for good. Ruth Ann stood over him, breathing hard, waiting for guilt, waiting for horror, waiting for God to strike her down. Nothing came. She felt only the cold air and the weight of the iron in her hand. Earl Sloan lay still on the concrete, the echo of what he had helped do to her family. Silenced. She emptied the register. $214. Made it look like a robbery. Left the way she came. Earl was found at 6:15 that morning. Blunt force trauma. No witnesses. The county ruled it a robbery gone wrong. That Sunday, Ruth Ann donated $200 to the church collection, sat in her usual pew, sang the hymns, shook hands with the pastor. That night, she opened her notebook, drew a neat line through the first name. 7 to go. 1 month passed. Barton County forgot about Earl Sloan. Robberies happened. Gas station attendants were not worth remembering. Ruth Ann had not forgotten anything. Curtis Hall ate lunch at the same diner every day. 12:15. Ham sandwich, coffee, slice of whatever pie they had. Curtis worked at the Barton County Savings and Loan. He had looked up Thomas Dawson's account balance the week before the attack. Told Dale Perkins there was no money. Provided the home address on Cutter Road. Some men swing the bat. Others draw the map. Both are guilty. Ruth Ann had waitressed at that diner in 1971. She still knew people, still had friends in the kitchen, still knew which seat Curtis preferred, the one by the window where he could watch the street. April 16th, 1984. Curtis finished his coffee at 12:42, complained about the bitter taste, left his usual tip, drove back to the bank. By 1:15 he was slumped over his desk. The other tellers thought he was sleeping. Then they noticed he was not breathing. Heart failure, the first responders assumed. Happened to men his age, stress, bad diet, the usual explanations. The autopsy found something else. Oleander, a common plant in Kentucky gardens. Deadly if you knew how to extract it. Tasteless in coffee. Ruth Ann had grown oleander in her backyard for 9 years. Learned its properties from a library book. Practiced the extraction in her kitchen. 2 men gone in 4 weeks. Both connected to what happened on Cutter Road. The Barton County Sheriff's Department did not make the connection. 2 separate incidents. 1 robbery, 1 heart failure. But Detective Harold Morgan had worked this county for 18 years. He had never seen 2 connected deaths in the same month. Earl Sloan, Curtis Hall. He pinned their photographs to the board in his office, stared at them. His partner leaned against the doorframe. "You think there is something here?" Both men were present the night Thomas and Michael Dawson were attacked, both named in the widow's statement. Coincidence? Maybe. Morgan pulled the Dawson case file from his drawer. Read Ruth Ann's original statement again. The 8 names she had provided to Sheriff Ratliff. Earl Sloan, name number 6. Curtis Hall, name number 7. Morgan lit a cigarette, watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling. "Get me the addresses of the other 6 men," he said. "You think someone is working through a list?" Morgan did not answer, but he had been a detective long enough to recognize patience when he saw it. 2 down, 6 names remaining. Somewhere in Barton County, Ruth Ann Dawson was opening her notebook. Roy Tackett drove a 1978 Camaro, black with a gold stripe, his pride. Took those mountain roads too fast. Everyone said so. His wife, his mother, the men at the bar. "Going to get yourself in trouble one day," they told him. They were right. May 21st, 1984. Route 119 winds through the hills east of Barton County. Sharp curves, steep drops, guardrails that had not been replaced since 1962. Roy left Dale Perkins's bar at 11:40 that night. 4 beers in his system, confidence in his hands, same drive he had made 100 times. Ruth Ann had watched him for 3 weeks, learned which nights he drank at Dale's, learned which route he took home, learned that he always pushed the Camaro hardest on the stretch near Miller's Ridge, where the road curved and the drop was 200 feet. Brake lines do not cut themselves. Roy hit the curve at 53 miles per hour. His foot went to the floor. Nothing happened. The Camaro went through the guardrail like it was paper, tumbled twice before it hit the rocks below. Roy Tackett was 28 years old, the youngest of the 8. He had wanted to prove himself to the older men that night on Cutter Road. He proved something else on Route 119. Detective Morgan stood at the crash site the next morning, looked at the skid marks, looked at the broken guardrail, looked at the wreckage below. "Brake failure," the highway patrol officer said. "Happens with these older vehicles, especially the way he drove." Morgan climbed down to the wreck, found what was left of the brake line. Examined the cut. Clean, too clean. This was not an accident, the officer shrugged. Could be wear and tear, metal fatigue. It is not. Morgan climbed back up to the road. 3 men gone now, all connected to the Dawson incident. He needed to warn the others. Morgan gathered them in the sheriff's conference room. Dale Perkins, Lonnie Brock, Wayne Messer, Jimmy Ratliff, Vernon Hayes, 5 men, 5 potential targets. Sheriff Ratliff sat at the head of the table, his nephew Jimmy beside him. The sheriff had not wanted this meeting, did not want questions about why the original case was never pursued, but 3 bodies made questions unavoidable. "Someone is hunting you." Morgan laid the photographs on the table. Earl Sloan, Curtis Hall, Roy Tackett. 3 incidents in 3 months. All of you were present the night Thomas and Michael Dawson lost their lives. Dale Perkins laughed, leaned back in his chair. "And you think it is the church lady, Ruth Ann Dawson? She is 110 pounds soaking wet. I think someone is working through a list. I think you should take precautions." Jimmy Ratliff, the sheriff's nephew, picked at his fingernails. Bored, untouchable. "My uncle runs this county. Nobody touches me." Vernon Hayes said nothing, but Morgan noticed his hands. They were shaking. Vernon remembered Ruth Ann at the funeral, standing at the graveside. No tears, no sound, just watching as they lowered her husband and son into the ground. He should have known then. Grief that quiet is not grief, it is patience. June 14th, 1984. Lonnie Brock told his wife he needed to clear his head, get away from the paranoia, spend a few days at his cabin in the Daniel Boone National Forest. "Nobody is hunting me," he said. "Morgan is jumping at shadows." He packed his rifle, his cooler, his confidence. He did not pack enough caution. Ruth Ann had learned to shoot in 1959. Her father taught her on a bolt-action 30-06, same rifle she carried through the forest that June morning. Lonnie liked to hunt the ridge above his cabin, sat in the same spot every morning, creature of habit. Most men are. Ruth Ann found his trail on day 2, followed it to the ridge, found a position 200 yards east, waited. Lonnie appeared at 6:47, settled into his usual spot, raised his binoculars to scan the valley. He never heard the shot. The Forest Service found him 3 days later. Hunting accident. That was the official report. Happened every season. A stray round from another hunter. Tragic, but not unusual. Detective Morgan drove to the scene, looked at the position of the body, looked at the angle of entry. This was no stray round. This was a marksman. Someone who knew how to shoot. Someone who had waited. 4 down, 4 remaining. Morgan requested state police assistance that afternoon. July. The state investigators arrived with fresh eyes and no local connections. 4 deaths in 4 months, the lead investigator said. All connected to an unsolved double incident from 1983. The only person with clear motive is Ruth Ann Dawson. Sheriff Ratliff shifted in his seat. His nephew was on that list. His own failure to investigate had made this possible. "She is a church secretary," he said. 47 years old, no record. She is also the only person who benefits from these deaths. They brought Ruth Ann in for questioning. 6 hours in the interview room, the state investigator across the table, Morgan watching through the glass. Ruth Ann answered every question calmly, politely. Yes, she had wanted justice for her husband and son. No, she had not harmed anyone. She was a Christian woman. She spent her Sundays in church and her weekdays in the parish office. Where was she the night Earl Sloane was attacked? Home. Alone. No witnesses. The night Curtis Hall collapsed? Home. Alone. The night Roy Tackett went off the road? Home. Alone. The week Lonnie Brock was in the forest? Home. Alone. No evidence, no witnesses, no weapons recovered. They released her at 11 that night. Ruth Ann drove home, made herself a cup of tea, sat in her kitchen. The same kitchen where Thomas had eaten his last meal, where Michael had laughed at his father's jokes. She opened her notebook. Wayne Messer was next. The remaining 4 men armed themselves, locked their doors, watched their rearview mirrors. Dale Perkins hired a man to sit outside his house at night. Vernon Hayes moved in with his brother. Jimmy Ratliff relied on his uncle's deputies, 2 of them assigned to watch his property around the clock. Wayne Messer trusted his shotgun, kept it by the bed, kept it by the door, kept it in his truck. "Let her come," he told Dale. "I will be ready." He was not ready. August 8th, 1984. The deputies sat outside Wayne's house, watched the front door, watched the driveway, watched for Ruth Ann Dawson's tan 1977 Ford sedan. Ruth Ann did not drive her sedan. She borrowed her sister's car, wore a grey wig and glasses she had purchased in Lexington, looked like any other woman in her 60s. She found Wayne at a diner in the next county, 30 miles from his house, 30 miles from the deputies who were supposed to protect him. Wayne was meeting a woman, not his wife. He made this drive every Thursday. Same diner, same booth, same lies. Ruth Ann took a seat at the counter, ordered coffee, waited. Wayne's coffee arrived, black, 2 sugars. The waitress knew his order. Ruth Ann knew it too. The waitress turned to grab the sugar. 3 seconds. Ruth Ann passed behind Wayne's booth. A slight stumble, an apology. "Pardon me?" Wayne did not look up, did not notice the small vial, did not notice anything until 45 minutes later when he collapsed in the parking lot. Same compound, different delivery. The oleander worked quickly. The deputies found out 2 hours later. Their assignment had slipped past them, gone 30 miles, met a woman who was not his wife, and now lay still on the asphalt outside a diner they had never heard of. 5 down. Detective Morgan stood over Wayne's body, the state investigators beside him. "How did she know?" one of them asked. "How did she know he would be here?" Morgan looked at the diner, the parking lot, the highway stretching back toward Barton County. "She is patient," he said. "She watches, she waits. She knows these men better than we do." "Then how do we stop her?" Morgan did not have an answer. 3 men remained. Dale Perkins, Vernon Hayes, Jimmy Ratliff, the leader, the one who swung first, the sheriff's nephew. Ruth Ann was saving the best for last. That night, Ruth Ann sat in her kitchen, the notebook open on the table. 5 names crossed out, 3 remaining. She looked at the photographs on her wall. Thomas on their wedding day, Michael at his high school graduation, the 3 of them at Christmas 1981. The last Christmas before the debt, before the poker games, before everything fell apart. She did not feel guilt, did not feel doubt. She felt only the hollow space where her family used to be, the silence in the house that used to hold laughter, the empty chair at the table where Thomas used to sit. 5 men had paid for what happened on Cutter Road. 3 remained. She would not stop until the list was complete. Ruth Ann closed the notebook, turned off the kitchen light, went to bed. Tomorrow she would begin planning the 6th. September 3rd, 1984. Special Agent Patricia Womack reviewed the case files on her flight from Washington to Lexington. 5 incidents, 1 suspect, 0 physical evidence. The FBI had been watching Barton County for 2 weeks. 5 connected deaths in 5 months crossed the threshold from local tragedy to federal interest. Womack had worked cases like this for 8 years. Patterns, patience, methodical execution. The profile was clear before she landed. Female, mid-40s to mid-50s, organized, patient, local knowledge, personal connection to all targets. Her supervisor had called it a textbook revenge case. Womack called it something else, a woman with nothing left to lose. She landed in Lexington at 4:15 that afternoon. By 7, she was sitting across from Ruth Ann Dawson in the Barton County Sheriff's interview room. Ruth Ann wore a simple blue dress, hands folded on the table, wedding ring still on her finger. 19 months after Thomas was taken from her. "Mrs. Dawson, I am not like the local police. I can see that." Ruth Ann's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a woman who had made peace with whatever came next. "I know what you are doing. I know why." Womack leaned forward. "Frankly, I understand." "Then you understand I have nothing to say. 3 men are still alive. I can protect them, or I can protect you. I cannot do both." Ruth Ann lifted her teacup, sipped, set it down precisely in the center of the saucer. "My husband and my son were not protected. The sheriff sat in this building and did nothing. The system looked at 2 bodies and shrugged." She met Womack's eyes. Why should those 3 men receive what Thomas and Michael were denied? It was not a confession, but it was close enough. Womack left the interview knowing 2 things. Ruth Ann Dawson was responsible for 5 deaths, and she was not going to stop. Jimmy Ratliff believed he was untouchable. His uncle was the sheriff. 2 deputies watched his house around the clock. He had not left the property in 3 weeks. Groceries delivered, friends visiting, everything brought to him. "Let the church lady try," he told his uncle. "She cannot get within a mile of me." He was right about the mile, wrong about everything else. Ruth Ann did not go near Jimmy's house. She went to apartment 4B at the Riverside Complex in Whitesburg, 32 miles from Barton County. Jimmy visited that apartment every Thursday evening, had for 2 years. His wife did not know. His uncle did not know. The deputies watching his house did not know. But Ruth Ann knew. She had followed him in April, watched the pattern develop, learned the girlfriend's schedule, learned that Jimmy arrived at 8:15 and left by 11, learned that he parked in the back lot and entered through the side door, learned that he left his weapon in the car, did not want to frighten his mistress. September 19th, 1984, 8:12 in the evening. Jimmy pulled into the back lot, checked his mirror, checked the shadows, saw nothing unusual. He walked to the side door, knocked twice. The door opened. Ruth Ann was waiting in the hallway. She had entered through the girlfriend's window 2 hours earlier. The girlfriend was bound and gagged in the bedroom closet, frightened but unharmed. Jimmy saw her face, recognized her, understood. "Mrs. Dawson, you were there that night. You stood in my kitchen. You watched them hurt my husband, watched them hurt my son. I did not touch them. I swear to God I did not. You did not stop it either." The knife was quick. Ruth Ann had practiced on pork shoulders from the butcher, learned where to place the blade, learned how much force was required. Jimmy Ratliff slid down the wall, his eyes wide, his mouth open, no sound. Ruth Ann wiped the blade, freed the girlfriend, told her to count to 500 before calling for help. She was gone before the girl reached 50. Sheriff Ratliff received the call at 11:47. His nephew, the Riverside Apartments, no longer breathing. He drove 90 miles per hour through the dark. Arrived to find state police already on the scene. Agent Womack standing over what remained of his sister's only son. "She got past your deputies," Womack said. "She knew about the affair. She knew the schedule. She knew everything." The sheriff could not speak, could not process. His nephew, the boy he had protected, the boy he had covered for, the boy whose presence that night on Cutter Road had guaranteed no investigation. He lay still on the hallway floor. "How?" he finally managed. "She is patient. She watches. She has been planning this for 18 months. Womack turned to her team. "Dale Perkins and Vernon Hayes. Find them. Put them in protective custody. Do not let them out of your sight. 6 down. 2 remaining." Dale Perkins ran. The night Jimmy Ratliff fell, Dale packed a bag, took $12,000 from the safe at his bar, drove north toward his hunting cabin in the mountains, 60 miles from Barton County, accessible only by a single dirt road. He told no one where he was going, trusted no one. The men he had once commanded were either gone or hiding themselves. The brotherhood that had walked into the Dawson house on Cutter Road had dissolved into fear. Dale had supplies for a month, a rifle, a shotgun, a clear view of the only road in. He lasted 23 days. Ruth Ann found the cabin on day 15. A record search at the county assessor's office. Property in Dale's father's name. Transferred in 1971. Most people forgot about inherited property. Ruth Ann did not forget anything. She watched for 8 days, learned his patterns, learned that he checked the road every morning at 7, learned that he made a supply run to the general store in Evarts every Tuesday and Friday. October 11th, 1984. A Tuesday. Dale's truck came down the mountain at 6:45 in the morning, earlier than usual. He wanted to reach the store when it opened, get back to the cabin before full daylight. Ruth Ann was parked on the county road, 2 miles from the cabin, a blind curve, no witnesses. She pulled onto the road as Dale came around the bend, accelerated. The collision was precise. She had practiced the angle in an empty parking lot, knew exactly how fast to go, knew exactly where to hit. Dale's truck spun twice, rolled into the ditch, the windshield shattered, the frame crumpled. Dale crawled from the wreck, blood on his face, leg twisted beneath him. He looked up and saw Ruth Ann standing in the road. "You," he coughed, tried to stand, failed. "18 months ago, you sent 8 men to my house, over $8,000. It was business, just business. My husband was not business, my son was not business." Ruth Ann raised the rifle, the same .30-06 her father had taught her to shoot in 1959. Dale lifted his hand. "I have money, 50,000 in the cabin. Take it, take everything." "I do not want money." She steadied her aim. "I want my family back. Can you give me that?" Dale opened his mouth to answer. The rifle spoke. The echo rolled through the mountains. then silence. Ruth Ann stood over Dale Perkins for a long moment. The leader, the man who made the call, the man who decided that $8,000 was worth 2 lives. He lay still in the dirt. The debt was paid. 7 down. Agent Womack found the crash site 6 hours later, followed Dale's trail from the cabin, found the truck in the ditch, found Dale beside it. She examined the scene, the tire marks, the angle of impact, the rifle wound. "She is escalating," her partner said, "getting bolder." "No." Womack shook her head. "She is finishing." One name left. Vernon Hayes, the man who swung first, the man who took Michael Dawson's life while his father watched. Ruth Ann had saved him for the end. "Find Vernon Hayes," Womack said. "Find him now, before she does." But Ruth Ann was already watching, already waiting. One name remained in her notebook. She had been patient for 18 months. She could be patient a little longer. Vernon Hayes had not slept in 6 weeks. Every sound woke him. Every shadow moved. Every car that passed his brother's house could be her, the church secretary, the widow, the woman who had eliminated 7 men and was coming for him last. He knew why she saved him for the end. January 15th, 1983. The Dawson house on Cutter Road. Vernon was the one who swung first. Dale gave the order, but Vernon delivered it. Thomas Dawson fell in his own kitchen. And then Vernon turned to the son. Michael Dawson was 22 years old, begged for his father's life, begged for his own. Vernon did not listen. He remembered the sound, the weight of the bat in his hands, the way Michael stopped moving, the way Thomas watched his only child fall. And then Vernon turned back to finish what he started. 2 lives, $8,000. Vernon had not thought about it much in the months that followed. Business, debt collection, the cost of gambling with money you did not have. He thought about it now, every night, every hour, every time he closed his eyes. Ruth Ann was coming, and Vernon knew he deserved whatever she brought. October 25th, 1984. Agent Womack placed Vernon Hayes in protective custody, a safe house in Frankfurt, 90 miles from Barton County, 2 federal agents at all times, no contact with family, no phone calls, no visitors. "She cannot reach you here," Womack told him. "You are safe." Vernon looked at her with hollow eyes. He had lost 30 pounds since June, had not shaved in weeks, looked like a man already gone. "She will find me." She found Jimmy at his mistress's apartment, found Dale at a cabin nobody knew about. "She will find me." "Not this time. We control everything. Food, access, information. She has no way in." Vernon shook his head. "You do not understand. She has been planning this for almost 2 years. She is smarter than all of us." Womack did not argue. She had studied Ruth Ann Dawson for 2 months, read every report, reviewed every scene. The widow was methodical, patient, adaptable. But the FBI had resources Ruth Ann did not. Surveillance, manpower, a controlled environment. This time would be different. It was not. October 27th, 1984. The safe house had a coal chute, an old feature, built in 1923 when the house was heated by a basement furnace. The furnace was removed in 1968. The chute was sealed with a metal plate and forgotten. Ruth Ann had cleaned that house in 1974. A church volunteer program, helping elderly parishioners with household chores. The woman who lived there was 91, bedridden. Ruth Ann spent 3 months helping her before she passed. She remembered the coal chute, remembered the basement layout, remembered which floorboards creaked and which stayed silent. The FBI did not know about 1974, did not know Ruth Ann had walked every inch of that house a decade before they chose it as a safe house. Ruth Ann parked 2 miles away, walked through the woods, reached the house at 1:17 in the morning. The agents were watching the doors, the windows, the driveway. They were not watching a sealed coal chute behind the overgrown boxwoods on the north side of the house. The metal plate came loose with a pry bar. Ruth Ann lowered herself into the darkness, felt her way across the basement, found the stairs. The house was quiet. The agents in the front room. She could hear their low conversation, the static of a radio. Vernon was in the back bedroom. She knew because she had watched the house for 3 days, saw which light came on at night, saw the shadow pass behind the curtain. The bedroom door was not locked. Why would it be? The threat was outside. The agents were outside. Vernon was safe inside. Ruth Ann opened the door. Vernon was awake, sitting in a chair by the window, staring at nothing. He turned, saw her face, did not scream, did not run. "I knew you would come." Ruth Ann closed the door behind her. "Did you think I would forget?" "No." Vernon's voice was barely a whisper. "I hoped, but I knew." She crossed the room, stood before him, the rifle in her hands, the same rifle that had spoken for Lonnie Brock and Dale Perkins. "Do you remember what my son said, that night in my kitchen, when you were hurting him?" Vernon closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face. "Please," he said, "please." He was 22 years old. He had never hurt anyone, never owed anyone $1. Ruth Ann's voice did not waver. "And you made his father watch." "I am sorry." Vernon opened his eyes, looked at her. "I know it does not matter. I know it does not change anything. But I am sorry. I have not slept since June. Cannot eat. Cannot think about anything except their faces. Good. I deserve this. I know I do." He took a breath. "But I need you to know. I have thought about them every day, every single day since January 15th. I see them when I close my eyes." Ruth Ann raised the rifle. "So do I." Vernon did not beg, did not plead, simply nodded. "Tell them I am sorry, when you see them." Ruth Ann steadied her aim. "Tell them yourself." The rifle spoke. Vernon Hayes fell back in the chair, his eyes open, his face almost peaceful. The 8th name was crossed. The agents heard the shot, reached the bedroom in 9 seconds. They found Ruth Ann sitting in the chair across from Vernon, the rifle across her lap, her hands folded. "Ruth Ann Dawson." The lead agent drew his weapon. "Do not move." "I am not going anywhere." She looked up at him, calm, exhausted, complete. "It is finished." Agent Womack arrived 14 minutes later, found Ruth Ann in handcuffs in the front room, Vernon still in the bedroom, the scene exactly as the agents had described. "How did you get in?" Womack asked. "Coal chute, 1974. I helped clean this house for a church program. Mildred Patterson. She was 91. I spent 3 months here." Womack stared at her. "You remembered a coal chute from 10 years ago." "I remember everything." Ruth Ann met her eyes. "I remember my husband's laugh, my son's smile, the way they looked at the funeral, both of them in matching caskets because the damage was too severe for open viewing." Womack had no response. "I remember the form letter from Sheriff Ratliff, the 8 names I gave him that he ignored, the 18 months I spent planning while those men drank and laughed and lived their lives." Ruth Ann's voice finally cracked. "I remember everything, and now I can finally stop." She was transported to the Frankfurt Federal Building that night, processed, photographed, placed in a holding cell. The notebook was found in her kitchen drawer the next morning. 8 names, 8 dates, 8 methods, written in neat handwriting. The last entry, Vernon Hayes, October 27th, 1984. Dated 2 days before her arrest. She had known exactly when it would end. The trial began in January of 1985. National news coverage, cameras outside the courthouse, the widow of Barton County. That was what the papers called her. The prosecution presented 8 counts of first-degree elimination, 8 methods, 8 months of planning. They called it cold-blooded, premeditated, the work of a calculating mind. The defense presented something else. Thomas and Michael Dawson, a father and son who lost their lives over $8,000. 8 men who walked free. A sheriff who protected his nephew. A system that failed at every level. Witness after witness came forward. Margaret Hensley, whose husband had owed money to Dale Perkins. He survived with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. The men had laughed while they hurt him. Robert Cordell, whose brother had refused to pay a debt to the same crew. They found his brother's car at the bottom of a quarry in 1980, Darlene Webb, who had dated Wayne Messer in 1978. She showed the jury the scars on her arm, cigarette burns, Wayne's way of teaching respect. One by one they testified. Years of brutality, years of silence, years of a system that looked the other way because Dale Perkins owned the bar where the deputies drank and Jimmy Ratliff's uncle wore the badge. The prosecutor asked Ruth Ann one question on the stand. "Do you regret what you did?" She sat straight in the witness chair, grey dress, hair pulled back, wedding ring still on her finger. "I regret that it was necessary." The courtroom was silent. "I regret that I buried my husband and my son on the same day. I regret that 8 men laughed about it a week later. I regret that the sheriff I trusted protected one of the men who took everything from me." She looked at the jury. 12 faces, 12 ordinary people from neighboring counties. "I do not regret making them stop. I do not regret giving my husband and my son the justice that this system denied them. And I do not regret that those 8 men will never hurt another family the way they hurt mine." The prosecutor had no follow-up questions. The jury deliberated for 11 hours, guilty on 8 counts of first-degree taking of life. The verdict was never in doubt. Ruth Ann had confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. But when the judge asked for sentencing recommendations, something unusual happened. 7 jurors submitted letters requesting leniency. One juror, a 53-year-old farmer from Breathitt County, wrote 3 pages. "What she did was wrong. What was done to her was worse. The system that was supposed to protect her family failed completely. She became the system because we gave her no choice." The judge read the letters in chambers, considered them carefully. Ruth Ann Dawson received 8 consecutive life sentences. No possibility of parole. She was 48 years old. She stood when the sentence was read. Nodded once, showed no emotion. The bailiff led her from the courtroom. She did not look back. Ruth Ann served 12 years at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women in Pewee Valley. She worked in the prison library, organized the shelves, helped other inmates write letters to their families, attended chapel services every Sunday, sat in the same pew, sang the same hymns she had sung in Barton County. She never applied for parole, never appealed her sentence, never expressed regret in any official proceeding. In 1993, a journalist from the Lexington Herald-Leader requested an interview. Ruth Ann agreed. "Do you think about them?" the journalist asked. "The 8 men." Ruth Ann considered the question. "I think about my husband. I think about my son. I think about the life we were supposed to have. Michael's wedding, grandchildren, growing old together on Cutter Road. But the men I think about Thomas and Michael. That is all I have room for." The interview lasted 45 minutes. The journalist left with more questions than answers. Ruth Ann Dawson passed away on March 12, 1997. Ovarian cancer. She was 60 years old. The prison chaplain was with her at the end. He had known her for 8 years, called her the quietest soul he had ever met. "Do you want me to pray with you?" he asked in those final hours. Ruth Ann shook her head. "I have made my peace." "With God? With everyone?" Her last words, according to the chaplain's notes, came just before midnight. "I will see my boys soon." She was buried in Barton County, same cemetery as Thomas and Michael. The headstone was simple, paid for by donations from people who had never met her but remembered her story. Ruth Ann Dawson, 1937 to 1997, wife, mother, faithful to the end. The graves of Thomas and Michael are 6 feet to her left. The 3 of them together again, the way it was supposed to be. Sheriff Harold Ratliff resigned 3 months after the trial. His department had protected the men who took 2 lives on Cutter Road. Covered for his nephew. Ignored justice until justice ignored him back. No charges were ever filed against the sheriff. No investigation opened. He moved to Florida. Passed away in 2003. His obituary did not mention Barton County. The bar that Dale Perkins owned changed hands 4 times in the following decade. Different names, different owners, same poker games in the back room. In 1989, a man named Harold Combs was beaten over a gambling debt in Barton County. He survived. 3 broken ribs, fractured jaw. He did not report it to the police. Everyone remembered what happened to Thomas and Michael Dawson. Everyone remembered what happened to the 8 men who took their lives. Some systems change, some do not. Was Ruth Ann Dawson guilty? Yes. 8 men, 8 planned eliminations, 8 families who buried their fathers, their sons, their brothers, because a widow decided that patience was its own form of justice. Was she also something else? Also, yes. A mother who buried her only child. A wife who identified her husband's broken body. A woman who walked into the sheriff's office with 8 names and walked out with a form letter. The law failed Ruth Ann Dawson, so she became the law. Is that right? Is that justice? Or is it simply what happens when desperate people run out of options and discover that patience is the most dangerous weapon of all? 8 men lost their lives in Barton County in 1984. Every one of them had helped take a father and son over a gambling debt. The woman who eliminated them spent her final years in prison, never seeing freedom again, never remarrying, never holding the grandchildren she should have had. Who was the victim? Who was the villain? After 40 years, Barton County still cannot agree. Neither can we. What would you have done if the law refused to act? If the men who took your child walked free? If patience was all you had left? Leave your answer below. And if this story stayed with you, there are more like it. Subscribe. The next one might be worse.